Hello and welcome to Talking Synths. I'm Sam, and this is not Carlos.
No.
This is Cris Blyth.
Hi.
Welcome, Cris. Cris is going to talk today about Fairlights.
Oh, yes.
And he's done a video series on them, is still doing a video series on them.
Yeah.
And it just blows my mind. So I think let's start off by saying everyone who's watching probably knows what a Fairlight is.
Right.
Everyone who's watching has heard of Fairlight a million times.
I would hope so.
But I don't really know much about them. And so this is a great opportunity to enlighten me.
I don't know. I thought you were going to tell me.
But you're building one. I mean, that makes my head explode.
It's a bit bananas.
And you're starting with something else.
Right.
But it's a different Fairlight system?
Yeah. So I've always had a love for Fairlights. It all started back, a lot of my guys my age have got the same kind of thing. You know, at your age when you remember Jean-Michel Jarre playing one, you know, seeing them on TV in the mid-'80s and going, whatever that thing is,
I need one.
I need one of those.
Yeah.
You know, not realizing nowadays it's so, you know, its performance is so tiny, but actually it has got some tricks up its sleeve which are quite amazing. But for years I always wanted one, but, you know, couldn't ever get them. And then about 2010, I was lucky enough to get one. The planets aligned, things happened, and I got myself a hold of one. And
Okay, now people are going to want to know, how did that happen? Because whatever it was, I want to do
so
that.
I literally put an alert on eBay, and it nothing ever came up for years.
Yeah.
And then one came up, and it was in the middle of nowhere, and it looked like it'd been hit by sat on by a person or something. It was bent in the middle, and it had 14 megs. It wasn't good, and that one didn't work out. The guy stopped taking phone calls, stuff, and then another one came up literally about a month after that, from nothing to two.
Yeah.
And so I said to my wife, I said, I think I really need this. And she said, well, this project actually, you know, needs music. We can justify it. And I'm like, oh, all righty then. I guess I'm doing the music on this project. So
Brownie points to the wife.
Absolutely. So anyhow, she ended up going to Kenya or Tanzania. I can't remember what it was at the time. And then she was there when I got the Fairlight. And then the day before I was supposed to go get it, she says, you need to come to Kenya now. And so I hoofed it up to San Francisco and got this Fairlight, what's got its own weird connection story to some other musicians that I know, which is just baffling. And I had this Fairlight. I didn't even get it on, out of its flight case. The next day I left and went to Kenya.
With the Fairlight?
Without the Fairlight.
Without the Fairlight, okay.
And then I just thought about it from afar whilst being in Kenya. A few years pass, I shipped the thing over there, along with some other things that I needed. And I've been steadily making music with this thing and using it in commercials for years.
And so you produce music for commercials, video stuff?
Yeah, and it's really funny. I think the limitations of the machine are what really drive it. It's like you've only got this thing to play with, like a xylophone. Somebody says, there's a beater for the xylophone, make something, you'll start using that thing.
Yeah.
You won't say, well, this xylophone doesn't have an undo, so I can't use this thing. It's like, no, you just get on with it.
Yeah.
So that's really the way that it makes you make decisions, which it seems to be a lot of the people when they talk about, recording things on tape, they're going back to that way of thinking of like, you're making decisions, you're getting things done.
Yeah.
It echoed what, for me, was Sound City, the great documentary that kind of talked about, the analog way of recording things, and I really resonate with that. I use it with Logic, and I use it with its own sequencer, and I've been learning more about the machine out there. I even started making videos out there in Kenya, and then it was from there that when I came back to the States, I got a phone call from a friend of mine on the users group, on the Fairlight users group, that said this particular musician had a Fairlight, and could he ask you some questions? I went, oh yes, I can answer questions about Fairlights. So we got on a Zoom call, and he said, so how do you do this and how do you do that? And I started going, yeah, so you hit F5, is it F5? Hang on. And I realized I didn't have a Fairlight with me. I didn't have anything. So at that point, it's like, I need to get a Fairlight. How am I going to get a Fairlight? So I literally just went, I need a Fairlight. But then, at that moment, my brain went, wait a minute, I've got something else. So, Fairlight went on to make these 24-track recorders called MFX machines. Very, very popular. Initially, they started offering the MFX boards as an add-in to Fairlight machines, CMI machines, so that they could run this, a Fairlight and a 24-track recorder built in. Fantastic, right? What's not to like about that? My idea was to have that in a shed and nothing else, just that. But anyhow, and during the time that they were doing that, they realized that a lot of these people were wanting to just use these machines as recording machines and not the CMI part. So then they made various different versions of these machines until they got it down to these boards that were actually CMI boards, but they were actually not acting as a CMI. And for a very short period of time, they put them inside the machine that looks like an MFX, but inside it was a Fairlight.
I see where you're going with this.
Now, so I already had an MFX machine. I'd used one for years before, and I was really familiar with them. But I needed a new keyboard for my Fairlight in Kenya. So I got a Fairlight. I got it for $300. This was an MFX machine.
This must have been at least a year ago.
On Craigslist. But it was sold as an MFX machine.
$300.
$300.
Okay.
Now, they even wanted to give me a flight case for it, but I didn't need that. I even sent my renters, my guys that were renting my house, to go pick it up. And I never saw it. All I wanted from it was the large keyboard. It was called the surfboard keyboard. I've already got an MFX. So one of the times that I was here visiting, I had looked at this old machine and not really thought much about it. But once I'd moved back here, I got it out of storage, and I thought, wait a minute, there was something funny about that other machine I remember. So I switched on that other machine. And I switched on that other machine, and bong, and it said CMI MFX. I thought, what's that? So I opened it up, and I realized the insides were very, very different to my normal MFX machine. I went, what is this? So I reached out to the community, and somebody said, oh, that's one of this really rare machines that was inside an MFX box that had CMI stuff in it. And I said, well, for my needs, I don't need it to play anything. I just need to access the menus. Can it run the software? And it turned out, yes, it can.
Wow.
So that was going to come to my immediate need. But then I contacted my friend Steve Rance, who used to work at Fairlight, and he still does. He works on the new Resolve stuff. And I went to his house because he said, you might be able to put some boards in this machine. It might actually work depending on the motherboard. Turns out it was the wrong motherboard. We found that out later. But in the meantime, he loaned me his Fairlight just to have. So I came back, my little car was laden down with the Fairlight cage, the huge honking keyboard, which weighs a ton, by the way, and all of the extra manuals, and a whole bunch of Fairlight boards. So then I realized that my MFX was only so many cards. My old hybrid MFX machine was those cards, but it was going to take a lot of work to convert it. So a lot of people that are on the community said, if you can find an empty CMI cage, which you won't, because they never appear on eBay. But if you can find one, then you could just populate it with those cards that you've got, and Steve's cards. There's going to be some things you have to do. There's some jiggery-pokery to make it work. And I said, well, all we need is one of these things to drop out of the sky. And literally, within a week, I looked on eBay, and one popped up. And I was sitting, I went, I think I'm going to buy. But I saw it, and within 10 seconds, I just hit the buy, and just bought it. And weirdly enough, it got from the UK to here in California in 6 days, total, from me pressing the button. And I was like, what? It arrived way too early. And then, so then that started the process of me taking even all the stuff that was on this machine, all the fans, all the stuff that was broken on this thing. So everyone that I knew was on the forum said, this just never happens. These things never pop up. And this happened with other parts. There was another board that I needed called the 354 board. And I said, I'll just go look for one. Oh, this guy, James, has one in the UK. Oh, buy. Like this. And I talked to Peter in Australia, and he's like, yeah, you're going to have a hard time finding that. I said, oh, I just ordered one. It's on its way. And he goes, what?
You have some good Fairlight
I've got
karma.
Some good Fairlight karma going on. And so I've had, so now I'm basically been putting it together. But one would think, now that I've got the proper mainframe and the whole thing, that it's a straight shot. It's not, because this cage, even though it's on a hardware level and the tracks on the boards are CMI compatible, it was never set up to be a CMI. It was an MFX machine.
And hence the adventures that you're
And
going
so-
through in your video.
And it's so much fun. It's really, and it is the adventure. I mean, it's funny. A couple of people said, "Well, why don't you just put all the cards in? Then that's the end, and you should be now recording music." I'm like, no, this is actually part of the journey, which I'm really, really enjoying.
Yeah, it is a good journey.
It's really good fun. Yeah.
So, at the expense of, or at the, I don't want to give a spoiler alert,
Right.
but is there an ending yet, or do you know the ending?
The ending, I've been filming. I need like more editors, or more than me. I might just get my son to, I don't know. I've got a lot more episodes that are recorded but not edited, because in the episode that I'm editing right now, it was more than 14 hours
Wow.
to make one which is of raw footage.
Yeah.
And I'm realizing I'm making it into 1 hour. It's going to be 2 half hours, part 1 and part 2, because there's a good bit at the end of part 1, and
So,
You know.
is there a happy ending?
there might be. I don't
Okay.
know yet. We're actually still figuring it out.
That's what's so intriguing about this. I mean, it's fascinating to watch, because
glad
you
you like
think,
it.
well, this guy's got to be a madman. Can this even be done? And
The more I'm going, the more I'm realizing I'm a madman. I am a madman.
but it's fun watching your madness.
I've been ignoring all the, well, as I said on the video, I said, I'm aware of my mistakes and I'm confident I can repeat them. Because there's been certain things like Andre, my friend that's up in Sacramento, he's like, oh, you got to watch out for this and this and this and this and this. And I'm like, still doing it, and I've just been plowing ahead, and things have worked out. There's been some weird stuff happening though. My Fairlight in Kenya was so stable. It never misses a beat. It has been so robust. It's just brilliant. And it's in absolute immaculate condition. It is clean as a whistle. Beautiful. This one is needing, lots of, what's really weird? I can't believe how much filing I've been doing. Filing and sanding. A synthesizer that involves most. I was filing, but
Standard
I was speeding
Fairlight
up.
practice.
But it is, every single Fairlight is different. They're all unique. They all have different. They weren't like a run-of-the-mill Fairlight. They're always had weird things going on.
Kind of like guitars or something.
It really is. They're really, really interesting. Every person that bought them got different options: hard drive, tape drive. Some of them were like, do you want the MFX capability for a future thing? If they said no, then they didn't put this particular board on the back, which means they didn't put the ribbon cable through for the blah. Now, something that I've really realized about a lot of this is, imagine if I started my adventure by picking up one end of a cable. You would think I'd look at the other end of the cable first and figure it out. But no, I started just going through. And I think that's one of the things that the machine for me at the beginning was mysterious. And it's almost like, well, I don't want to disturb it. I'll just plug all this stuff in, and I don't. This could be bad. So but now I'm realizing I really needed to really take it apart. So there was parts that I needed to get it down to the nuts and bolts, and it's been the best education for me, because I'm realizing, oh, that needs to be connected to here.
Yeah.
But no one seems to. There's a lot of people know about it, but it's not really written down anywhere. And I'm asking people on the forums who are already busy people to help me out with certain things. And of course, it's like they've got to get on with their own lives, so they can't have me going, so where does this plug in? Oh yeah, and where does this plug in? And what's this for? And sometimes there's different answers depending on what that machine was configured for.
Yeah.
So, I've been on the phone call and to some of these guys, and I'm saying, this is happening. And he goes, is it flashing once or twice? I'm like, once. And he goes, right. Go to pin 7 of this IC and chop off its leg. I'm like, what? Yeah. And then connect that to pin 2 of this other board. I said, are you pulling this from memory? I'm like, yep. All right. It's got 2 flashes now. All right, it's working fine now. Just leave it like that.
Oh, that is crazy.
So it's bananas. It's really bananas.
So tell us what a Fairlight CMI does
Right.
that the MFX doesn't,
Right.
and what's so great about it. They used to cost like a Brazilian dollars.
It is.
Right?
It is. It was actually 1 Brazil worth. You could just buy Brazil. The way the Fairlight works is actually different than the way that modern samplers work. Some of them, there's some software that does emulate this, but basically, each card inside the CMI. So let me explain the CMI. So the CMI, computer musical instrument, what it does is it is basically, in its day, was a collection inside lots of actually separate computers that were all talking to each other, which is part of the thing, because in my machine, they just argue with each other. and I have to say, stop, and they're fighting. But they usually work in concert together, that basically each card can produce 2 notes. And so you need 8 cards to make 16 notes.
All right.
So instead of speeding up the pitch or slowing down the pitch to do a sample, they slow down the computer, the whole thing. Not the machine, but that card, and they slow down that computer to go up and down.
The processing
The
speed?
process, everything, the whole card. So now, it's more complicated than that, but that's the net result, is what's happening. So the way that the filtering works, and the way that the sound actually sounds, like if you've ever taken, I had the same experience when I was working in video games. When you take an old 8-bit sample and play it through an 8-bit card, sound card, those Sound Blaster cards, it would sound a certain way. You take that 8-bit sound and put it through a 16-bit sound card, it sounds terrible. It's like when you look at an old games monitor and it's rounded off edges of the CRT, and then you look at it on an LCD, it looks too sharp and it doesn't fit. So in the same way, you can take a sample from a Fairlight and play it on a normal, VST, on Logic or whatever. It doesn't sound the same. I mean, it's just night and day. It doesn't sound the same, especially when you go high and low. Mm-hmm. So that's the way that the Fairlight were doing it. They were doing it because that's the way that was the most efficient way of doing it back then. The processors, it was a dual processor machine, but it was 16-bit, but it was actually an 8-bit machine. It was the traffic kind of signal, the traffic man, whatever, those guys, it was a dual processor. There was 2 traffic cops for the data. And that was the 2 processors there were 6809 chips. They were ancient chips, 1 megahertz. But then each of the cards had its own processor. So that's how they could really do all that amazing stuff. Now, the MFXs were a natural extension of when they wanted to just simply record multi-track audio. So there was no pitching, there was no nothing. It was just playing the audio in and out.
Record it, playback.
And so that's how they realized, even though they were offering this expansion of like, you can make your CMI into an MFX, they were designing the new MFX. It was just simply the cards and 1 card for doing all the processing work. A much simpler machine. But in between that, I think they were making these machines, but they didn't have the new one ready. So they literally stuffed them inside. Yeah. There were definitely examples of MFX machines in CMI guise, in a CMI box. But there was very few of the CMIs hidden inside an MFX box, which is this gray flat thing.
So not everybody could find an MFX and say, okay, I'm going to do what Cris did.
And you can't, because there's very few of those machines around.
Okay.
Now, when I got that machine, I didn't know. I was only getting it for the keyboard, and I told the guys that. When the guys were actually getting out of their studio, I said, I'm actually just wanting the keyboard. If I can have it for less, he goes, no, just take it. Just take the thing away. They didn't realize that their machine was CMI based. My other MFX, which is called the MFX 3 Plus, is not CMI based. And it has nothing, the software looks the same, but it's much slicker and smooth and everything like that. And those were the real workhorses in Hollywood for a long time. Todd A.O. West, which is the sister company to the company I worked with, had a whole bunch of them. And they were amazing, rock-solid, super fast editors. And that's now what Resolve is now doing, or Blackmagic is now doing with their Fairlight division. And Steve Rance is now working on basically the MFX of Resolve. And it's a newer incarnation of that. There was many incarnations of those things, but that's what they're working on now. It's absolutely amazing. And it's very, very similar with Jogwheel and the 2 hands,
Is that why it's called Fairlight?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. They bought the rights to that.
And so when you're done, you're going to have 2 Fairlight CMIs.
Well, I will have my Fairlight in Kenya. I will have Steve's Fairlight, and I'm planning to maybe get him hypnotized so he forgets that he had one. Steve won't be watching this, will he? And so Steve will be wanting his Fairlight back. I hope not, but he will. And then I'll have this Fairlight that's built. And then I'll have got my MFX machine. So I've already got a rack where my MFX is at the bottom. And I can now put this Fairlight, the CMI, in the space that the last one occupied. So it's going to be a 24-track record at the bottom and a CMI at the top.
Nice.
Well, that's if we get there. We have to get to the end of the road yet, There's many obstacles.
You'll get there. You've made amazing progress, right? I mean,
so far, so good. And the next episode is very interesting things.
Well, now that's intriguing.
It is fun. I think the thing is that I've been enjoying doing it, and I've had to not put jokes in. I've had to try and play it straight. Sometimes there'll be things that get a bit more fun, but on this particular episode, I've had more fun. I've just, I like doing fun things, but I think I didn't realize until I was editing this how much I was realizing how much I was enjoying it. That the journey is the destination.
Yeah.
And that's, but it's funny also that I had, when I was teaching or helping out my friend, we did these Fairlight Fridays where I had a camera above looking down the Fairlight, and I had a video output from my Fairlight, and I had it all going on to OBS, the broadcasting software. Mm-hmm. So I had it all sectioned out so we could go on a Zoom call and talk, and he could see what I'm doing. And so we did that quite a few times, and then he got busy with his next album, and we're going to be picking back up. But he will be also, there'll be more Fairlight. There's more people making music with Fairlights now. It's interesting. The group. I don't know if you've seen the group on Facebook. It's fairly active.
No, I haven't.
It's really, really good fun. There's a bunch of super lovely people on there, and we all help each other out. And with this files or things that we all need, or bits and pieces that we kind of help each other out, which is nice.
How many people out there have Fairlights?
This is the funny thing. There was on one report says there was only 200 ever made. Then the other report is that there was actually 300 in total.
Is this CMIs? Or?
CMIs.
Okay. Yeah.
But that's apparently Series 1, Series 2, and Series 3. That's it total. I can't believe it's that few, but that's apparently, it's either between 200 or 300. There's a couple of people that said, I worked in the factory, it was 200. And then there's other people that said they worked in management, it was 300. So who knows? But
obviously, the factory and management didn't talk much.
Maybe that's part of the problem. I don't know. Yeah, who knows? But the interesting thing is, we've done a little poll on the group, and I think there's only 30 machines out there that people are on the group talking. That's the maximum amount. Yeah. But in the main ones there's a more of a core group of people that are always like posting pictures of their Fairlights and doing stuff and showing their music and how-tos and things like that. So
when people post pictures of Fairlights, do they normally put cats on them or not?
No, there's no cats. That was actually banned a few years ago.
Okay,
yeah, you're not allowed that. There's some, there was many legal matters for that. No, it's fun. I think it's interesting how people are now in the retro kind of world. There's a big retro movement in computers too. The Amiga has got a huge, big resurgence, which I was involved with on a different set of videos, which is interesting. Because I worked at Digital Domain, and they use them for their motion control systems and capturing systems on Titanic and things like that. That's a different story, but still. So I like old retro machines. I like all that stuff. So yeah, I'll be continuing to make music on the Fairlight for sure.
Good.
Yeah.
And do you make a lot of music?
I did until I started this project. That's one of the things I realized. I've not made a squeak of music since, but the music that's on it, actually up until this episode, the music that's been on the background has been my music.
Okay.
So I've enjoyed, and that's some of just my old stuff. But I love making music, and since I've come back to LA, I've made a lot less music. I've just been a bit busy because I was living in Kenya for 8 years, so I'm coming back and being into the flow of things. I actually literally, my studio is still in Kenya. Everything's still there.
How long has it been since you've been there?
It's been about a year and a bit. Yeah. So when I came here, I was literally coming for a holiday, and then didn't know I was going to be going back until a little bit later. It's like, I think I'm going to stay for a little while. So one thing led to another, and then before you know it, I'm kind of like, I think we'll stay here. My son is now 16, so when he came back, he's like, wait a minute. You took me away from all this, so he's now getting back into the swing of things. But yeah, all my stuff is back there. I play bass guitar too, so I've got all my basses are out there. I'll play guitar and drums. I've got 2 Roland V drum series out there, just there.
And so what's going to happen with that?
Well, our guys are using it because they're still making productions. We have
Good.
a show called What's Good Africa, and it's on Revolt TV right now. So they're using that. In fact, the music that's used on the show is being made there in the studio there.
Oh, okay.
So
cool.
It's all, I might not be making at least some of my gear, but no, actually what I get the guys to do is I get them to open up the flight case, because I covered up the Fairlight before I left. I didn't want anyone to be messing with it. So I covered it up by getting them to open it up and let the foam breathe so that it doesn't go bad.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a terrible thing when foam goes bad.
Oh, especially, that especially, it's a double caser one. It's one of those, So yeah, so I'm looking forward to the part where I'm actually making music more. That's definitely a goal. But I don't have any of my gear here. The only gear that I have here is the gear that I had in my recording studio that I left behind in my house here 10 years ago. So a lot of it is older stuff. So it's like I need to do some catch up on Amazon or Musician's Friend or something.
Do you have other keyboards? Are you a synthesizer guy?
Well, I've inherited a JD8000, which has got the broken control at the right hand side. It's very fragile, those machines, and I've got. That's about it right now. I did have, and what I use is just a controller. Is an old Korg M1 from back in the old days, and I brought that across from the UK. It's 240 volts, or I don't know. And before that, I had a JX3P, which I really shouldn't have gotten rid of.
Yeah, that's my favorite.
Yeah.
So was your first keyboard a Fairlight CMI?
No, my first Fairlight was a Casio VL Tone.
Okay.
That was my first synthesizer. What did I say, Fairlight? No. So my first synth was that. My dad got me this. Kind of like, that was when Jean-Michel Jarre was big. And then when I really started multi-tracking my VL Tone, my Casio VL Tone, and he was like, uh-oh, all right. And so he basically surprised me and did the research and went, here's a JX3P, and I just lost it entirely.
Nice.
And so I started multi-tracking that way back in the day, and then saved up for a 4-track and and then a Q disc, the quick disc recorder.
Yeah.
And I've still got 2 of those, by the way, and a bunch of discs, which I thought about when you did your episode on discs the other day.
Yeah.
And so
Probably more people have Fairlights than have quick discs.
but those things are reliable. The last time I used it, which is when I first came back, it still worked.
Good.
Yeah, so I've got that kind of put aside. It's doing okay. But yeah, that was my JX3P was my main one. Then I had my M1 and a JX3P together, and that was when it was the most synthy setup. And then I moved into games, doing video games, and then I did less music then, and then moved more into filming and all that kind of stuff. But then when I built my studio in LA and in my house, that's when I had more software synths, things like that, and it was more set up for recording. And I even had my original MFX in there for recording too, which was a non-CMI version. And then got into editing, and all that kind of stuff, and went more into production. And
and so when you started hammering out this CMI, it was a natural thing to say, I'm going to make a video out of this.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
It was really like, I've got to document this.
Yeah. And it's called I'm Building a Fairlight CMI.
I'm building a Fairlight CMI.
Yeah.
Because it was really weird on the time that what happened in the project was, it got to the stage of I only needed it to use the menus. I didn't need it to make the Fairlight. But then I realized it's like, there are very few of these things. It feels like it's like my duty that these cards are sitting there to be made into something. You got to let it become the thing it's supposed to be.
I feel you. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like this. I can't just leave it here. So it's like, okay, I have to get the sound cards, and that's where Steve Rance came to the picture, and he's super generous and helped me out. I'll text him at 2:00 in the morning. He'll get back to me. He'll say, dude, he'll say in the morning, or he'll get back to me. He works a lot with Singapore, so his timeline is sometimes funny. So he'll talk to me in the middle of the night. He's been super, super helpful. He gave me all the cards, and I've been cleaning them all up and numbering them, putting them in a database and all that kind of stuff. But it was really when I realized that the box that I had, it was going to take too much work to convert. It was like, well, now this makes me realize I have to do this. There is a way. Yeah. And then that kind of led me down that path, and it is super exciting. It is. I wish I didn't have to, I mean, this sounds bad, but I wish I didn't. I've got work during the day, and I've got projects that take up my time, but if I was just downstairs tinkering and, I'd realize now why my dad is an artist, and he would just go to his shed, just be in his shed to paint or just to do his putt. And I'd sometimes say, what are you doing? And he goes, nothing. He's just sitting in his shed. So in the same way, I'm in my garage just working away, and I'm quite happy down there, but I always have to remember, it's like, oh, I need to film this. And where's my camera? And I have to remember to switch it on. So
that's my job.
I know. I just have to absolutely remember all the time, and sometimes, as you'll see through the videos, look quite bedraggled. I'm like, I'm filming anyway. I'm not going to get it perfect, and I think that also goes down to the mistakes as well. As I've made a ton of mistakes. There's some stuff I'm embarrassed of. It's like I literally didn't look at the other end of the cable, I should have known that, but I'm talking about this and not realizing the answer is over there, 3 feet away.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to show it anyway.
That's how it is.
I'm just going to show it.
That's how life is.
I'm not saying I'm an expert because I'm much more knowledgeable now. But at the beginning of this,
But wow, what an undertaking.
It's mental. It is bananas. And we'll see. There's some parts that are still very hard. There's some things that are not easy. There's some things that I'm still figuring out. So we'll just have to see.
Keep your file sharp. And
That's right. I've literally gone, this is weird. I've gone through a blade on my saw. What? I need to buy more blades. Here's another thing that happened. I was going regularly to Fry's Electronics that just closed down. I was going there to get bits. Now, I rarely need to go to Fry's, but when you need to go down to hold one thing and see if it's the right type, Fry's was there until last week. I needed to go this weekend. I've got a DB25 connector I've got to pick up, and now I'm going to have to get it from Amazon. So,
the adventure continues.
The adventure continues.
Well, that's about all the time we have.
Good
and
stuff.
What a fascinating story.
I hope you enjoyed it.
And I'm hoping there's a happy ending, but even if there's not, it's fascinating, and it's just brilliant to watch you go through it. And kudos to you, and what you say about you felt like you had to do it because those cards wanted to be a CMI.
They were there. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally relate to that.
Great stuff,
Yeah.
man. Really enjoyed this.
All right, Cris Blyth, the series is I'm Building a Fairlight CMI. You got to see it. It's great. And if you like what we're doing here on Talking Synths, just press that subscribe. Could you reach that subscribe
Yes,
button
it's right down here.
Yes, got it. All right. Great. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time. And until then, modulator.